with one of those products or not. So this interview today, I'll be interviewing Sheikh Salman and the founders of a company called Primary Finance, who have come up with a new home purchase concept that is complete. I would say, from what I saw of it, is undoubtedly halal.
Right.
There's no doubt that there is absolutely no riba involved at all. So everyone, please stay tuned in. I'm about to start the interview shortly. Please stay tuned in. The interview is in two parts. So the first part will cover traditional mortgages and Sharia compliant mortgages as well. And then the second part will talk about a little bit about the primary finance product. And right in the end, there is a question about Bitcoin. So whether it's halal to invest in digital currency or not.
Right.
So yeah, I would ask everyone to stay tuned in right to the end. So the interview is about to start. Do you want to say anything before that, Tanim?
No, really looking forward to.
Okay, so let's go. Assalamu alaikum. This is Azhar Sohail. Welcome you to another season of the Islamic Finance Show on Ramadan FM. The growth over the last 10 years in the Islamic finance industry has enabled the sector to tailor products targeted at the Muslim consumer. All of these products, especially the Islamic mortgage, has attracted a lot of interest. However, they have also attracted some controversy. On today's show, we will be discussing whether or not it is permissible for Muslims to purchase a house using traditional mortgages, and if not, why not? We will also be discussing the concept of halal mortgages and some of the doubts consumers have in relation to these mortgages offered by Islamic banks. And then finally, we will talk about whether it is possible to have a fully Sharia compliant home purchase plan, especially in the Western economic climate. Joining me today on the first episode of Season 2 are Sheikh Salman Hassan, a Sharia scholar and lawyer, Razaullah, CEO and founder of Primary Finance, together with his Chief Finance Officer, Hassan Ahmed. Now let's jump straight into it. The first question, is it okay for a Muslim living in the UK to buy a house using a traditional mortgage?
Now, as you know, a traditional mortgage is based on the bank lending you some money and then charging an interest rate on top of the amount that they've lent you. There is almost complete consensus among the scholars around the world that this is a form of riba, which is prohibited by the Sharia and specifically in the Quran. Now, despite that, there has been a fatwa which has been around for several decades by the European Fatwa Council, and they looked at the circumstances of Muslims in the West, and they said, because we're a minority and because social housing can lead to a lot of deprivation and loss of dignity, and for people who don't have any other means to have shelter apart from getting a mortgage, they under certain conditions said it is allowed for people in certain circumstances to get a traditional interest-bearing mortgage from the high street. And those conditions were that the house to be purchased must be for the buyer and his household. So it must be your first home. You must not own another house. And you must not have any surplus asset that can help you buy a house by means other than a mortgage. So you can't say, well, I've got investments in stocks and shares and I don't want to liquidate them now. But I still don't have a home. I'm going to use a mortgage to get a home. So they essentially did this as a form of social dispensation to try to allow the Muslim community in the West to build wealth and not become a deprived and impoverished community. So it has some maqasid or objective elements inside that fatwa. And the fatwa does not say that interest is halal. What it does say is that in certain circumstances, certain people who fulfill certain conditions are, under those conditions, permitted to get a traditional mortgage. And when those conditions no longer apply, they must get out.
And for an example, what would be one of those conditions?
So those conditions are that they don't have a home.
Yeah.
So if somebody has a council house, which is adequate for them, then they're not permitted to go and get a traditional interest-bearing mortgage, for example. Now, it's what I've found is a lot of people remember the fatwa and they forget the conditions. So it's really important to take the fatwa with its conditions. So an example might be, I know a brother who has 10 children.
Yeah.
He can't find anyone who will rent him a property because no landlord wants to give a property to a family with 10 young children.
Yeah.
So, and he also doesn't have a council house. So he simply cannot live on the street with 10 children and a wife. So he's in a situation of dire need. And I think the fatwa was probably intended to apply to people like him.
So not to people like who can rent. So say, for example, I can rent if I wanted to, but my reason for buying a house would probably more in relation to just, I suppose, providing a stable home for my family, right? So, when you're renting, it's not a permanent residence. So how do you provide a stable home or stable environment for your family if you don't have a permanent residence? Would that be a condition, or is that...
Yeah, so interestingly, the fatwa does not mention the ability to rent.
Okay.
And that's a criticism of the fatwa that has been levied against it by many people, because they say that there are some people who are wealthy enough to actually afford good quality housing at current market rent. And those people really don't have that dispensation to then get a traditional mortgage. And I think there's some merit in that criticism. But a lot of the people, especially the Muslim community in this country, probably could not afford market rent in this current market in some parts of the country.
Yeah. No, that's a good point, because obviously, rent is going up just like house prices, but it's still cheaper to I suppose buy these days.
And particularly if you're on an interest-only mortgage, for example, the interest rate is significantly lower than renting.
Yeah, definitely.
I think something that's quite interesting as well is you talked about rent and giving people that stability and security if you own your home. We've seen house prices go up. We've seen the demand for home and for people to be able to rent their homes going up. So there's a big shift. I wouldn't say a big shift, but there is a shift in the market in terms of the where the power lies with the landlord or with the tenant. And I think the Olympics was a good example in London, where landlords were cutting leases or rental agreements short, so they could then rent out to new tenants at an extortionate price from people that were traveling in. So you could be. There were stories where people were renting for many years, and then all of a sudden the Olympics came to Stratford and they were without a home. And they were just told to pack up within a couple of months. So there is that argument
concern.
to say.
So actually, the European Fatwa Council were probably taking a long-term view, saying that you don't have security of tenure if you're renting, and if you want to grow a strong, wealthy community, you need to be homeowners in the long term. Otherwise, you're subject to being kicked out by your landlord anytime, and that doesn't make for a strong community that can help itself and help others. So they took the objectives of trying to create a strong, wealthy community that is self-sufficient and self-sustaining in view when they gave that fatwa, which is probably why they didn't make the condition that if you can rent, you can't buy the property.
Yeah, and I think on a personal level, I think I've always struggled with the fact of having a traditional mortgage. And then one of the things, when I heard this fatwa, it kind of made me feel, I suppose I felt less guilty. But at the same time, there's always that kind of, I suppose, I'm not at peace with myself for having it. So there's always that thing in my heart saying, you know what, this doesn't feel right.
That's right. So in a sense, that fatwa is a temporary stopgap. It's really important to understand that. So as a community, as a Muslim ummah, it is not, it is our responsibility, if there isn't a truly Sharia-based alternative, to make one. Yeah. And that solution or that fatwa should only apply until we've made one. So we'll still be answerable to Allah on the Day of Judgment if we don't put efforts in to make a truly Sharia-compliant alternative. And that's why we're here today, the three of us, because we feel that we have, inshallah, launched a Sharia-compliant, truly Sharia-based alternative that will make this fatwa unnecessary.
And I think the key is what you just said there is a stopgap. And I think, as you mentioned, the fatwa is aging and it's come to quite some time. Since it's been released. So, is it a time where we can go, well, the market has moved on a little bit, there are products out there, or is it safe to say that, there isn't a true alternative out there yet, which is hopefully what we're going to discuss?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to not just there being an alternative, but there being an alternative that's practical.
Yeah.
So there are alternative options at the moment. For example, the shared ownership options. From a Sharia perspective, they're actually pretty good options. But it's just the cost perspective which makes them potentially quite impractical. In particular, with certain types of shared ownership products, if you were to realistically purchase your home through them over the long term, they would cost a prohibitive amount of money, significantly more than financing through a high street mortgage, for example. Now, the difference being that the shared ownership option is clearly a halal option, but if it's simply unaffordable, then it's not practical. And so it becomes about striking a balance, and that's where we believe the primary finance product, which we'll talk to you about today, inshallah, has really struck that balance quite nicely.
Okay. So just before we move on to, I suppose, the next topic on I suppose, the halal mortgages that are available, I just wanted to ask the Sheikh just to address something, because basically there is a video on YouTube. You've probably come across it. And I believe the Sheikh is from Uzbekistan. And what he's done, and this video has gone viral all over the West. It was quite big in the US as well. So what the Sheikh was basically saying, and he's got credentials. He's studied in Uzbekistan. I think he's studies in Syria, and he also has credentials from Al-Azhar University in Egypt. And what he basically was saying about the traditional mortgages is apparently the riba that's within that mortgage and also the debt within that mortgage can't be defined by the Islamic definition of riba and debt. And my understanding of the reason he gives for that is basically what he's saying. When I suppose the Quran and the Hadith talk about riba, they're talking about a debt, which is where somebody loans you money, and you get that money in your hand, and you can use that money for whatever you wish, and then pay the person back, and the agreement is, there's an interest element to it, so you pay back more. Whereas what he's saying, when it comes to the mortgage, the bank doesn't actually give you the money. So the bank never physically gives you the money, although they say they're lending you money, and although they say they're lending you money and you have to pay this money back, and they also mention interest. The actual transaction, what he's saying is the actual transaction itself isn't the same type of debt, because what they're doing is the bank is lending you money to purchase a house. So the money never comes into your hand. And therefore, the definition of that debt is completely different to the I suppose, the Islamic debt. And that was his main point and the main point of his argument. And basically what he's trying to say, because it's an asset-backed loan, it's not the same as a standard loan. Therefore, we can't talk about riba in the same terms. Have you heard that? And
yes, I've watched the video.
Okay.
My response to that is, firstly, if a bank gives somebody a loan, they can either give them a loan and say, you can do what you like with it. Yeah, it's just a personal loan. Or they can say, we'll only give you this loan in order to buy a washing machine or buy a house or a car. And we'll take a security over that asset to protect that loan, right? So whether they give you money to do what you like with it or they give you money to buy something specific, it's still a loan. That doesn't change the fact that a debt is created and you owe them that money back. Whatever happens to the asset. What we have to look at is, if that house is destroyed, do you still owe the bank the money? Yeah. That's the question. That's the question we need to ask. And the answer to that is yes. So the debt is on your liability, not on the house. Yeah. The house is just a security for the debt.
Yeah, and in actual fact, the only reason the bank doesn't hand the money to you personally is to protect their debt. Yeah. Because there's a risk that if they hand it to you personally, you might run off and never come back. Yeah. So what they do is they minimize that risk. They mitigate it by passing the money straight to the solicitor instead. That's the only reason it doesn't come into your hands. Yeah. But the fundamental purpose of the agreement is for them to lend you money with which you go and purchase the asset.
That's right. So, and so the question we ultimately ask is this: in Arabic, we say, "Is this a daynun fi dhimma? Is this a debt on your liability?"
Mm-hmm.
So, if all your other assets are erased from the earth, you still owe them that money. If you die, they can take it from your estate. They can take it from the assets your children would inherit.
Of course,
You see, so it's clearly a debt. It's the facts of it are that it's a debt, right?
Yeah.
And it's a daynun fi dhimma. Then let's apply the Sharia to it. Can you charge any money on top of a debt?
Yeah.
Because that's riba under Sharia, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if this is firstly a debt, according to the fact, secondly, they charge you some money on top, therefore it's very clearly riba. I can't see any other way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that completely makes sense. Thanks for clarifying that. I think it's quite simple, really, because it is a debt under Islamic definitions or any other definition. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, you have to look at the substance of the contract rather than just the form. So it's not enough to say the money isn't coming into your hands.
Mm-hmm.
That's the form of the contract. But the substance of the contract is that they are lending you the money, and it is you who owes them that money back with interest.
To give you an example, suppose you owe me £5, and I owe Raza £5. So I say to you, right, can you give that £5 straight to Raza? So you don't give it to me.
Yeah.
And then I call up Raza and say, has he given it to you? He says, yes. So then both debts are settled, but the money didn't go through my hands. You see? But my debt is settled now. I no longer owe him £5.
Yeah.
So does that mean that because the money didn't go through my hands, you haven't paid? Can I go back to you and say, you didn't pay me?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I can't do that. That would be dishonest.
That's a good point. True.
Yeah, I think not to talk about it from a fiqh perspective, but just and touching on the substance and form, like as the economy has changed, the way we trade, the way we deal with things, the way we buy things has changed as well. So you could expand that to money being transferred electronically, and then saying, well, are you actually really buying something because you've not handed somebody cash. It's done through electronically. So the mechanisms in way we trade and the way we operate in the economy are moving, are changing. But what it boils down to is really the fact of what the substance of the transaction is, and distilling the true points of actually, is it a debt? If it's a debt, then therefore anything on top of the debt is interest, and ignoring the mechanism of how it's done.
Okay.
One other point that Sheikh Atabek made, I think his name is Sheikh Atabek.
Sheikh Atabek, yeah.
One other point he makes is that in his view, the borrower from the bank, the home buyer, is actually an agent of the bank. Not borrowing money, but he's appointed by the bank as the bank's agent to go and find a property and buy it for the bank.
Okay.
I don't think the facts of the transaction support that analysis, because firstly, there's no agency agreement between the bank and the customer.
Yeah.
Secondly, if the customer were buying the property for the bank, then it would become the bank's property. It would have to go into the bank's balance sheet, which it never does. The bank never becomes the owner of the property unless it forecloses and takes control later when the debt is, if there's a default on the debt. But at first instance, when the contract is made, the bank takes no risk in the property, is not the owner of the property, is not a landlord. So the facts simply don't support that analysis, and I don't understand how that can be arrived at.
Okay. So I think that's pretty clear. So now let's move on to the second topic in relation to halal mortgages. What is different about these products that make them halal or perceive them to be halal?
Is this the current Islamic banking
Islamic
offering?
banking, yeah.
Right. Well, firstly, the current Islamic banking offerings are approved by respected Sharia scholars on the Sharia boards who give a fatwa saying that they are Sharia compliant. Now, those same scholars also say that these products are not ideal and that they are a stepping stone towards being Sharia based, so that they have given certain dispensations, certain permissions, which they wouldn't otherwise give in order to allow Islamic banking to get off its feet and slowly move in the direction of what's better.
Okay. So, but what is it specifically, like, I suppose, about the contract that actually makes it permissible?
Right. So in a traditional mortgage, the bank simply gives you an amount of money. It doesn't physically give you, but it lends you an amount of money, which you owe that back and then you pay interest on top, and that's not permissible.
Mhm.
So what the Islamic Bank says is, we're not going to lend you money. We'll go into a joint ownership in the property with you. So if you put down 10%, the bank puts down 90%. So you co-own that property 10% and 90% in those ratios. Then the bank says, over time, you buy our share off us. So that in 20, 30 years' time, you own your property outright. And in the interim, you pay rent to the bank on the bank's share. So if you look at the basic contracts of co-ownership and rent, they are in principle permissible under Sharia.
Yeah.
So it's on that basis that they say it's permissible. Now, of course, there are objections to the way they do it, which are actually alluded to by the same scholars who approve them. So they say that the way it's done and the way that two sale contracts are connected into one, and the way the banks actually do create debt is not ideal.
Yeah.
And that's something we have to do everything we can to move away from.
Mm-hmm. So I think with my experience on that, and I mean, a few years back, I applied for an Islamic mortgage, and when I went through the process, it was more expensive. It was I found it to be it's substantially more expensive. I think it's probably we're talking like 20-30% more on the repayments.
Right.
And when I looked at it, it just felt to me like they were replacing or repackaging it, almost like replacing the term for interest to rent. And then I didn't quite understand the risk-sharing element of it. So if there's a co-ownership, you'd think that if the house price went up, then they should get a share of that as well. And if the house price dropped, then they should be part of that risk as well. So for them, they lose money as well. So those things just didn't feel right to me.
So there's, I guess, trying to stand up for the banks, and we don't work for one of the banks.
Yeah.
So, this is just coming from a third person rather than from the bank itself. That should be borne in mind. But trying to stand up for the banks, what I would say is there's a reason the Islamic bank mortgages cost more. If you think about how a traditional bank makes money, they charge the interest rate, but they also charge daily interest for late repayments. They also charge fees for early repayments.
Oh, yeah.
And they basically make money in every single imaginable circumstance.
Yeah.
The Islamic banks do not do this because they follow Islamic principles. So, for example, it would not be permissible to charge you late fees or to charge you interest on a daily basis for paying late fees. And so what the Islamic banks do is they donate that to charity instead. So they don't make that same money that traditional banks make. And so, as I understand it, the reason the Islamic bank mortgages are more expensive is to allow for the fact that they cannot make money in the same ways that traditional banks can make money.
Okay.
Now, as I mentioned, we don't work for one of the Islamic banks, so you need to get it from the horse's mouth. But that's, as I understand it, why the Islamic bank mortgages cost a bit more. Now, with regards to terminology, we need to be careful here.
Yeah.
We need to understand that the scholars approving these products are very well respected, very distinguished scholars, and they would not approve them unless they thought it was the right thing to do. Now, as Sheikh Salman has rightly said, they may not necessarily believe it's the optimal solution, but at the same time, they clearly believe it's a solution that is heading in the right direction. And so it's not necessarily correct to say that they have simply swapped terminology.
Okay.
But we, at the same time, should study what some of the key concerns are that you've discussed. So in particular, if a property is destroyed under a traditional mortgage, because the bank has loaned you money, you owe that money back to the bank. You still have to pay that money back regardless of whether the asset still exists or not.
Yes.
This is still the case with Islamic bank mortgages. If the property is destroyed, you have an agreement. So although it's a co-ownership, it's a beneficial co-ownership. The bank owns the property, you beneficially own a share, and you own more and more of that share as you purchase the asset off the bank. And after the last repayment, the title deed is transferred into your name. So you have an agreement with the bank that you will gradually purchase their share off of them over time. And if the property is destroyed, you must still carry on purchasing that share over time, even though the property no longer exists. So this is where
it's actually immediate. So if it's destroyed, they can, according to the terms and conditions, immediately require you to buy their share of them for the outstanding amount of debt, just like a traditional mortgage.
So I suppose I don't know if they force you to have a insurance policy for that.
yes,
But I suppose if you have
insurance.
if you have an insurance policy, that would
So
just
the
pay
more
the whole
likely
thing.
scenario, because houses are very rarely destroyed or fall into the sea.
Yeah.
More likely scenario is a negative equity situation.
Yeah.
So in a negative equity situation, let me give you a scenario. Somebody's been paying their mortgage for 10 years, 20 years. Then they become disabled, lose their job, and they just can't keep up the payments. But the property's at that point in negative equity.
Yeah.
Right. So if the bank then, after 2 months or 3 months or however long they give, it's usually a couple of months, if they foreclose and then they sell the property, which they can do according to the terms and conditions and the legal charge, and a loss is realized on the house. So initially the house was bought for, say, 100,000. Now it's 80,000, £20,000 loss. And this goes back to your point about risk sharing.
Yeah.
Will each co-owner in the property take their share of that loss? And with the banking product, they won't. In the terms and conditions, it says they don't have to if they don't want to. They can if they want to, but they don't have to by law. Or the contract says they don't have to, and that's the concern I think you raised.
Yeah.
And to understand why that is, we have to go back to what banking is, because banks are financial intermediators. They take money in deposit accounts, current accounts, saving accounts, and they make money by then using that money to finance other things. Yeah. So because they owe that money to their account holders as a debt, effectively, there's no way they can invest that except through a debt. Otherwise, there'll be a mismatch of asset and liability.
Okay.
Do you see?
Yeah.
So by law, actually, the law does not allow a bank.
To all of our wonderful listeners of RFM, thank you so much for your support. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless each and every one of you during this blessed month of Ramadan. Stay locked for more amazing shows. Amazing shows. Amazing shows.
This Ramadan, help us do more for the most destitute families of the world by becoming a supporter of our Ramadan campaign. Running in 12 countries, our mission is to feed and provide support to families and some of the world's most disadvantaged children. We provide them with the essential food items to chase away the pains of hunger from £30. Join us in saving lives now. Call 0114 365 4454 or go online to familiesrelief.org.uk. Help us keep families together.
Ramadan Mubarak from Adam Accounting Services.
Ramadan Mubarak.
Need help with your accounts and tax work?
Contact us today on 01908 545 775 and see how we can help.
Adam Accounting Services. Friendly local accountants. 01908 545 775.
Truby's Garden Tea Room invites you to the Bring and Share Great Get-Together Iftar on Sunday the 19th of May, 7 p.m. at Campbell Park, Cricket Pavilion, Milton Keynes. The program will start with Quran recitation, speeches, nasheeds and songs from different faith groups.
This year there will be an Eid card design competition.
We will pray Maghrib, Isha and Taraweeh in the marquee. Contact Sister Krishina on 07702 894940. Inshallah, looking forward to seeing you all on Sunday the 19th of May at the Great Get-Together Iftar. For more information, go to Truby's Garden Tea Room Facebook page.
My name's Rob and I've benefited.
My name's Bima and I've benefited.
My name's Arman and I've benefited.
My name's Philip and I've benefited.
My name's Cara and I've hugely benefited.
My name is Farida and I've benefited.
My name is Sophia, I benefit.
I'm Kunza and I've benefited.
Do you want to benefit?
I want to benefit. If you want to benefit, visit www.lot-tree.org. Lot Tree Traditional Learning.
Intercargo Logistics Simplified. For all of your transport requirements, Intercargo offers transport by air, sea and road, helping you move all your freight around the world. We offer import and export services with direct link to HMRC Customs, enabling us to customs clear your goods at entry, airport or port of entry in the UK. We're fully accredited by IATA and have offices in Milton Keynes, London Heathrow, Manchester, Glasgow, New York, Toronto, Dublin, Amsterdam and Paris. We can meet all of your logistical needs. Intercargo Logistics Simplified.
Waffles, crepes, cookie dough, ice cream, just what you need after a long day of fasting. Dessert Island is open until 1 a.m. during Ramadan, 7 days a week. And there is free parking at the rear. Come and see us at 116 to 118 Queensway, Bletchley. We can even deliver. Just visit dessert-island.co.uk or download the app.
The Islamic Centre MK here in Coffee Hall still has outstanding debts to pay. Sponsor a brick for £20 in your name, those of your friends and family, or someone who has passed away. Sadaqah wipes out the sins like water extinguishes fire, Tirmidhi. This Sadaqah Jariyah is a form of giving that extends past our lifetime and helps those whom you have donated on behalf of benefit after theirs. To sponsor a brick for £20, email info@ramadanfm.com. That's info@ramadanfm.com. Don't forget to include your name and contact number. Please help to make the Islamic Centre debt-free this Ramadan.
Simplify your legal matters with Arc Plan Consultancy. They offer services for commercial leases, buying and selling, residential property transactions, debt matters, contractual agreements, landlord and tenant disputes. Qualified legal advice can also be arranged. Book your free 30-minute consultation now on 0785 754 9115 or 01908 36 8000. Or you can visit the Ramadan FM website based in Queensway, Bletchley. Save up to less than 50% on fees now.
For a list of all our sponsors, please visit ramadanfm.com.
Ramadan, 87.9 FM.
But they don't have to by law, or the contract says they don't have to, and that's the concern I think you raised.
Yeah.
And to understand why that is, we have to go back to what banking is, because banks are financial intermediators. They take money in deposit accounts, current accounts, saving accounts, and they make money by then using that money to finance other things. Yeah. So because they owe that money to their account holders as a debt, effectively, there's no way they can invest that except through a debt. Otherwise, there'll be a mismatch of asset and liability. Okay. You see?
Yeah.
So by law, actually, the law does not allow a bank to use depositors' money and risk it in an asset except through a debt.
Okay.
Yeah. So even if Islamic banks wanted to invest in the way we have in our structure, where we do actually take risk in the property, by law they wouldn't be able to, and it's in recognition of that the Sharia scholars gave them a rukhsa, a dispensation, saying get the concept, even if you don't get the essence or the substance, get the concept of Islamic banking off the ground, get it known, and then we can improve it in future.
Mm-hmm.
And we believe that we are part of that improvement.
Yeah, and I think this is again a bit of a question. Well, this is a question. Is really, do you feel that that the banks are doing enough to move with the times in regards to? You mentioned like there was a dispensation that was given to them, and are we seeing that evolution, or is it coming from the root up? Like for example, what we're trying to do is the next evolutionary step, and we're taking it away from banking to other products,
to community-based finance. So this is for the community, by the community. That's really exciting, and there's a long history of that in this country with the credit unions and co-ops. 100 years ago, banking as it is now didn't exist in this at this size. Most finance was done within communities helping themselves. I think that's where the Muslim community can apply truly Sharia-based principles and create alternative financial institutions that are not banks, that can serve our financial needs and be true to Islamic principles in substance and form.
Yeah, I mean, once you break free of that limitation that you cannot risk depositors' money, right?
Yeah.
You cannot take a risk with their money because you owe that money back to them. If you think about, Sheikh Salman explained that you put £100 in your bank account, the bank lends £98 of that out to somebody to buy their home.
Yeah.
So this £98 has been created out of thin air, right? This is how the banking system works. you still owe that. You still own that £100 in your bank account, but somebody else now has £98 as well.
Yeah.
So see how that extra 98 is fictional.
So that £98 is fictional. The only way banks can do that is if they can guarantee they're going to be able to give you your £98 back, right?
Yeah.
And that's a legal requirement because you're depositing money with them under trust. It's your money. They must give it back to you. They cannot risk it. So the only way they can do that is by guaranteeing that you'll get your money back. And the only way they can do that is by not sharing the risk on the underlying asset that the home buyer is purchasing.
Yeah.
They can only do it that way. So once you break free of those constraints, then the world is your oyster. Then you can actually start seeking truly risk-sharing options, which is what we at Primary Finance are doing.
And I think
we're not a bank. We don't take deposits. We're not a deposit-taking institution. We rely on both community-based finance and external investor funding. And that offers us a whole wealth of extra flexibility around how we can structure the product. And that's what's enabled us to create this very unique product that we've come up with.
Okay. And I think this is obviously our final topic of the day to discuss what this product is. Because I think personally, when I was looking at looking at buying a house and looking at mortgages, looking at the Islamic and non-Islamic options, I kind of came to a point where I just almost gave up, and I just thought, you know what, in this environment, are we ever really going to get or be able to put a product in place that is going to be, without question, Sharia compliant? And I almost kind of just thought, I just can't see it happening at the moment unless there's a revolution in the whole banking industry, right? Then, of course, I came across your product.
The funny thing is,
yeah,
you mentioned that hopeless feeling. That is it even possible in the current economic construct that we live in? And the funny thing is, us three here sitting in front of you, up until 2 years ago, probably felt exactly the same way.
Yeah,
felt exactly the same way.
Wow.
And it's only because, I'll tell you how I started with Primary Finance. This is a story I love to tell because it reminds me of why I'm doing this. So I am an actuary by background, alhamdulillah, a fairly unique skill set that attracts good salary. Right? So alhamdulillah, up until 2 years ago, I was working in the city, not wanting for money, and I was very comfortable, and I was quite happy to carry on living that way. And I was working at the Bank of England at the time, and I was telling the guy next to me how my dream is to save up lots of money, buy lots of properties, and retire off of the rental income. And this was a non-Muslim guy who I was speaking to, and he pointed a finger at me, and he said, Raza, with a skill set like yours, you have a responsibility to do something about the housing crisis we're in, rather than contribute to it. And that really struck me, right? That is a very Islamic way of thinking. And I thought, this guy isn't a Muslim. He's probably not religious even, but that's his mentality. That should be my mentality, given that I'm a Muslim and, I believe in this kind of social entrepreneurship. And so it really got me thinking. And actually, later that year, I went on Hajj. And whilst I was on Hajj, I was standing on Arafah. I was making sincere dua to Allah. And I started thinking, Ya Allah, you've given me health, you've given me wealth, you've given me intellect, you've given me an able body, an able mind, and a skill set possessed by not that many people on earth. Ya Allah, what am I going to say to you on that day when you ask me what I did with it all? What am I going to say to you? And I realized I didn't have a good answer. And I started crying like I've never cried in my life, trembling like I didn't realize I was capable of trembling. And that's when I decided, already having the seed in my mind, to give up my job as an actuary and start trying to do something about the housing crisis we're in. And so I decided, I came back from Hajj, I quit my job at the Bank of England. I started setting up Primary Finance on the idea that I have a skill set that I must be able to apply in some way to try and actually do something beneficial for the housing market we live in. I must, if a qualified actuary cannot do something about riba, then is there anybody that can? Right? That was the mentality I had. So I set about setting up Primary Finance and started designing this product, and asked Sheikh Salman to join me in tweaking the key aspects of it and making sure it was truly Sharia compliant and getting that seal of approval from him. And alhamdulillah, it's because we decided to refuse to believe that it's impossible. We decided to believe that, when Allah wills something, it will happen. It doesn't matter if it seems impossible. You take a step towards Allah, He comes running towards you. There is no power, no might except with Allah. We decided to stop hating it with our hearts, stop hating it with our words, and start changing it with our hands. And this is what's missing in our community.
Yeah.
We're very happy to sit back and accept this is just the way it is.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to change.
Mm-hmm.
But we need to start changing our hearts and minds and deciding, no, if we're doing something for the sake of Allah, Allah will help us and it will happen. And that's why, alhamdulillah, we're at this position now where we have come up with this product where we can genuinely challenge the riba-based economy.
Yeah.
Only if people get behind it and support us, inshallah.
Of course.
But we are at that stage now where this product, this is groundbreaking, right? We've been told that this has the potential to be as disruptive as Uber, right? And this is our vision. In 20 years' time, our vision is that nobody will want a traditional mortgage anymore, because this is going to be the product that everybody is going to want, inshallah. Whether you're Muslim or not, it doesn't matter. It's just a fair, ethical product. And actually what's interesting is when we speak to non-Muslims about it, they're as excited about it as Muslims, because they realize that the current banking system is not a fair system. It doesn't treat the home buyer with respect. It doesn't treat the home buyer with dignity, and it's just completely unfair. And there is a better way of doing things where both the home buyer and the capital provider are treated equally and fairly and with justice. And inshallah, we'll tell you how we're doing that.
Yeah. So I think, obviously, we're planning plan to have you on the show over Ramadan to discuss primary finance in more detail, your product. But we've got some time now, so tell us a bit about what this product actually is.
Yeah. So we keep going on about how brilliant it is. We haven't actually told you what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
So, alhamdulillah, so the way our product works is we decide to share in the property as true partners with the home buyer. Now, from a contractual perspective, the home buyer owns the property from day one, right? So they are the owner on paper. But what we have is an agreement, an understanding that we will treat it as partners, because if we've put in 50% and you've put in 50%, it's fair to say that we have 50% responsibility over the property. So what that means is we share all risks as partners and we take all decisions as partners. Now, what that means is that there is no debt.
Yeah.
Even though we've put in money and you own the property, you do not have to pay that money back to us.
Yeah.
We are partners in the property, just like if you and I are going to buy a car together.
Yeah.
I haven't loaned you any money, you haven't loaned me any money. We both jointly own the car. We both take the same risks in the car, and we both make decisions as partners before making any major decisions. And that's the same principle as our product. When the home buyer wants to purchase our share off of us, they are welcome to do so, but they are under no obligation to do so. Instead, they pay rent on our share of the product, right?
Yeah.
So it's fair to say that if you are the only person using the property, but we own 50% of the property, it's fair that since you are using the property exclusively, you pay rent on our share of it.
Of course, yeah.
As long as you're paying rent on our share, that is your obligation complete.
Yeah.
But we don't want to trap people renting for the rest of their lives.
Of course.
So what we do is we incentivize you to purchase our share off of us by saying, rather than paying market rent on the property, if you purchase our share at a recommended rate every month, in any month where you purchase that recommended level of equity, we will give you a massive discount on your rent in that month.
Okay.
And what that means is if you can afford to make the recommended payment, you would be mad not to, because the rental discount we give is up to 50%.
Wow. Okay.
Which is enormous.
Yeah.
So if we take a step back and think about what this means for the pricing, it means that when you're treating it like a rental property, you pay rent in line with the local rental market. It's not pegged to interest rates, it's pegged to the local rental market. When you're treating it like a home finance product, you pay a finance rate in line with the financing market.
Yeah.
And so it gives you complete flexibility and control according to your personal circumstances. What it means is that you stick to your recommended payment when you can afford to, and over the term of the agreement, you fully own the home.
Yeah.
If you have difficulty, if you face difficult times, you can just pay rent, which will cost you less.
Yeah.
And if you can't even afford to pay the rent, we have an added security buffer in there called an equity buffer.
Yeah.
Because you own tangible equity in your property, if you can't afford to pay us rent, you can pay us in the equity that you own instead.
Yeah.
So to give an example, if the average home buyer owns 10% of the property, has 10% equity in the property on day one, you can think of this as your 10% deposit on a mortgage, right? If you own 10% on day one and you lose your job and you can't even afford to pay your rent, on day one,
Yeah.
So an extremely unlikely circumstance.
Yeah.
But let's say this happens. That 10% equity buffer will typically see the typical person through 2 to 4 years,
Yeah.
right? Which is unparalleled. The bank will give you 2 months payment holiday and then realistically repossess your property.
Yeah.
With us, you have 2 to 4 years because of this security buffer.
Yeah.
Now, we're not going to sit there and keep taking equity off people, right?
Yeah, of course.
Ultimately, if we realize this person has no hope in making payments, we'll make a decision as partners and we'll say, look, it's probably in your better interest to sell the property while you've got a high share.
Yeah.
Make what you can off of it and buy something which you can afford. Okay. But the point being, although we have the same protections in place as a bank, we don't exercise those as quickly as a bank would.
Yeah.
We give you every opportunity and we help you as much as possible to keep you in your home right until the very last moment.
Yeah.
And that's the primary finance difference.
So my only question to that is at the last point, say all your equity has run out,
mm-hmm.
and at that point, say you manage to get a job or
mm-hmm.
manage to find a way of start paying just the rent, but
mm-hmm.
you can't buy back.
That's fine.
Would you repossess the house? You would.
No.
You'd let them pay the rent.
So even if you own no equity in the property,
yeah,
at that point it's a landlord-tenant agreement.
Yeah.
So then you're welcome to carry on paying rent.
Okay.
But at that point, if you now miss a rental payment because now you can't even pay the rent, you've got no equity to pay back.
Of
and
course.
at that point, as a responsible lender, we would have to exercise our security.
Yeah, of course.
Because we have
a landlord in this instance, not a lender, not a finance.
Exactly. Yeah, so at that point you're a landlord, of course. Yeah.
And bear in mind, we have a responsibility not just to the home buyer, but to the capital provider as well. We have to treat both with fairness, right?
Yeah.
But the point being, we've done everything in our power to keep you in your property by that point. And there comes a point where it's just not practical anymore.
Yeah.
So we do have the same security as a bank, but we won't exercise it until much further down the line.
Just to be clear, at that point, the circumstances permit, and our financing arrangements at that time permit, to enter into a fresh financing arrangement to eventually own that home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, the aim and the objective of the plan is for you to own your home, and hence the pricing mechanism is set up so that we will give you a discount so that it's cheaper for you to buy the home. And in most instances, it will probably be better for you to actually go down the home purchasing plan because it's cheaper to do that than to rent out on the active market.
Yeah, and I think, that would have been one of the concerns if it was just rental value, right? So if you were charging based on, I suppose, market rent value, but because you're giving that discount, I suppose it probably makes it more competitive with the traditional kind of purchases, right?
And so in that instance where you said somebody finds their feet, they get their job, they're earning enough, and obviously depending on their financial situation, it probably makes more sense for them to start buying equity back, unless there's a sudden change of heart where they don't want to live there anymore. But if it's a case of they're down on their knees, they've picked themselves up, they've got themselves a job, then financially it makes sense for them to start buying equity back because it will probably be cheaper than to just rent.
Okay, no, I think that's pretty clear. And I think what I want to do, I don't want to ask any more questions around the primary finance product at the moment, because I'd like to spend probably an hour with you at some point during this month of Ramadan to kind of discuss that in more detail.
And people have a lot of questions, and we have frequently asked questions, and we can cover some of those off, and that will take an hour in itself. So that's
okay, perfect. So I think thank you so much, and I think one of the reasons, obviously, for having you on the show is because I personally, when I heard about this product, I felt excited. I just felt, you know what, mashallah, these guys are doing a great job, and I hope, I wish that this product, comes to the market very soon, because hopefully I can be one of your first customers.
Inshallah. Inshallah. Yeah. Every single person says that.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I hope to make every person feel like they're the first customer.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. But
what we would say is, alhamdulillah, we have a lot of people who are very excited about this product. But this is a community initiative,
of course,
and it requires the support of the community to get going.
Yeah.
So to fund our launch, we are actually asking the community to support the launch with some qard hasana.
Yeah.
And the details are all on the website, primary-finance.com.
Yeah.
Now, we've made a conscious decision in the first 2 to 3 years of trading to primarily offer our services to people who support our launch with some Qanat Hasana. The reason being that it becomes a virtuous cycle. You help us get off the ground and we help you.
Of course.
So do go onto the website to your listeners, find out about how that works, and inshallah we can all help each other and create a better world for our children to be able to purchase their homes free from the curse of riba.
Inshallah. Okay. So thank you so much. I think we just have to end the show. But I think before I go, before I came here, I just remembered because I was at the mosque last night, and and this was the Ramadan committee kind of event, and one of the guys, when he found out that I was speaking to, I'm going to be presenting the finance show, the first question he asked me, he just goes like, make sure you ask this question to the sheikh, hopefully he can give you an answer. He wants to know about bitcoins, right? So, I mean, are they permissible? What do you think?
Do we have time for that?
We've got a few minutes.
All right, okay.
Yeah.
Now, let's go back to first principles and the Sharia. So, there's a concept in Sharia, in fiqh, called bay'ul ma'doom, sale of something that doesn't exist, which comes from a prohibition of the Prophet ﷺ, in which it is said that naha an bay'il gharar, he prohibited the sale of uncertainty or the sale of risk. And the most extreme form of an uncertain or sale of an uncertainty is the sale of nothing, right? So if I were to take this plastic cup and say this plastic cup is worth 1 Mars bar, and this plastic one is worth 2 Mars bars, and that plastic one is worth 3 Mars bars. So you can, and I write 1, 2, 3 on the plastic and say, go off and start trading this as though they're Mars bars, right? I've created Mars bars out of nothing because these plastic cups are negligible in their actual cost or their actual value. And that's what we mean by the sale of nothing, to create artificial money and then use that to trade real things. Because you're swapping. When you trade a piece of paper for a phone, you're swapping the paper for a phone. You're actually giving him nothing. Although the government has designated this is worth £50 because we say so. It has no actual, Allah didn't create that to be worth the equivalent of a phone. You see, so we have to understand basically what we mean by something and what we mean by nothing. And nothing is to give artificial value to something that Allah didn't give it to it. So when you do that, when you create artificial currency, that has a tremendously negative impact on any economy, because if a government or a bank, and banks create artificial money as well, we talked about that earlier, they can create lots of artificial money, then that dilutes the value of the pounds in my pocket while I'm sleeping.
Of course.
Because then it has, there's more pounds chasing the same goods and services. So then the price is going to go up. That's what we call inflation. And that's why artificial currency is haram, because it creates financial crisis, it creates death and destruction. And it's actually a very extreme form of riba. And I'm not going to go into the technicalities of how it's riba, but it's artificial currency is essentially a ribawi form of money. So all artificial currency in principle are prohibited by the Sharia. So even the pounds and the dollars that we use every day are in principle not permissible. However, we suffer today from something we call umum al-balwa, which is a calamity that has afflicted everybody. There is no other form of real currency anymore. We don't have actual asset currencies that exist that we can use anymore.
Like gold,
silver. Or in the old days, they used to use even salt. The word salary comes from salt.
Wheat and grain.
Wheat and grain. Any
that's got a commodity, basically.
Any fungible commodity can be used as currency. So because of that situation, what we have to say is, in this situation of umum al-balwa, of a crisis, we are allowed to use the currencies that are available in order to buy goods and services to survive. Right? So if I need to buy a loaf of bread to feed my children, I'm allowed to use pound sterling, even though it's artificial, to go and earn it and then buy a loaf of bread with it and feed my children. I've got no other way to do that.
Of course.
Right? So it's temporarily, as a dispensation by Sharia, this is my view, by Sharia, artificial currencies are permitted. So when people ask me, can I trade Bitcoin? I will ask them, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to use it as a form of money remittance? Do you need to buy an airline ticket in dollars? So you're going to convert your pounds to Bitcoins to use it on a website to buy a ticket to go to Cairo. If that's what you're going to do, then that's the same as using pounds or dollars to buy an airline ticket. It's the same. So I can't say one is better than the other. In fact, the cryptocurrency might be better because there's less transactional costs.
Yeah.
As a form of currency, it might be better. I'm not sure. I think the jury is still out on that, but it might be better, right? But if you say, I want to buy Bitcoin because I want to hold it, and then wait for it to go up, I'm speculating on the supply and demand of that Bitcoin. So I'm buying nothing, essentially, speculating on the increase in value of that nothing to cash out and then convert it back into my other nothing, which is pounds, and therefore I'm richer, which means I can actually go and buy more Mars bars, right? That is a form of speculative investment into nothing, which the Sharia does not allow. And that's the same as me converting my pounds to dollars to speculate on the movement of the price of dollars. So this goes back to the point of currency exchange. I'm allowed to change my pounds to dollars to buy something in dollars. Or as a protective mechanism, you can use it as a shield. If pounds are collapsing, so my nothing that I've got in pound is going to become absolutely nothing, not even be able to buy Mars bars. I can convert it into dollars to protect my wealth.
Of course,
right? So as a defensive mechanism, my view is it's permissible to trade currencies. It's permissible to trade artificial currencies to buy goods and services that we need. And when I say need here, that also includes luxury. So I can use it to go and buy a holiday for my family. But it's not allowed to trade artificial currencies for speculative purposes to simply bet on the movement of prices between them.
Okay, now that's perfectly clear. I think that was really the question that was asked. It was in relation to using it as an investment, I suppose. So that's definitely not permissible.
That's right.
But when it comes to other usages, it's the same as
the two. So for protection, for protection of your wealth, you can convert into other currencies, other artificial currencies, and for goods and services. Yes.
Thank you.
So until we establish an Islamic economy with real commodity money, may Allah give us the tawfiq to do that.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. So we had to end the interview there. I know that was quite an in-depth discussion about I suppose traditional mortgages, halal mortgages, and this new product that I suppose Sheikh Salman Razaullah and Ahsan Ahmed has trying to bring to the market. I know a lot of you have a lot of questions. I've seen on the WhatsApp that there's a number of questions. We will have Razaullah and his Chief Finance Officer Ahsan on the show next week. So they'll be live in the studio next week. So please save your questions for then. And also, you're welcome to visit their website, www.primary-finance.com, where there's a lot of details around their product and what support they need to bring it to the market. So I know we covered quite a lot there, and I just wanted to. I've got Tanim in the studio, and I just wanted to really talk to him about key takeaways, so that the listeners can get a brief summary of what they could or should have taken away from the interview or from the show today.
I think it was a very in-depth view of home finance. And I think one of the biggest takeaways, I think, is to understand the purpose of the original fatwa, right? That was there at a time for the need, for the people, and the stipulations against that you had to be the buyer. This had to be your first property. You couldn't own anything else other than that. And that's the only way of financing. So you couldn't have stocks and shares, and you have your own businesses also turning over X. That you could feasibly afford a property.
This is the only way for you to get a house.
Exactly. And I think and even at the time, he was explaining that it was a kind of a stopgap bridging scenario, right? That this isn't ideal, isn't saying that it's a halal. This is just a form that we can get to, so that we can get to the next step, which alhamdulillah they seem like this is a potential alternative, right? In terms of community-based funding by the community for the community. So I think that was one of the biggest kind of takeaways from there, and also him talking about his own personal life, right? You know,
Yeah.
he talked about his career, quitting his job, you know, going on Hajj, obviously quitting his job after that. You know, I think these are very, very, you know, real life.
I think the product that he's brought out is very simple. You know, when you look at it, it feels like it's nothing revolutionary. You know, it's very simple, right?
Why do they do it?
Yeah, why hasn't this been done all this time? You know, it feels very simple. But I think when you look at the product in more detail, when you've got things like how they'll be collecting rent, what incentives they give you to buy the property back, that's when you see that, you know, actually the guys thought about it. And from my understanding, and I know Raza quite well, and my understanding is, you know, he quit his job, disappeared for about 2 years, just working on this,
on just putting this model together,
together. And you know, there's already shared ownership schemes out there, so I suppose he picked that up and used that as his foundation. And just thought, okay, how can I make it easy? Because the shared ownership schemes don't make it easy for you to buy it.
No.
Right? So, you know, you can buy 30% of a property
originally,
but then for you to buy back another 10% or 5%, you have to revalue the property, pay a valuation fee, etc. And, you know, may even have to pay stamp duty and all these kind of things. So they never incentivize you to buy it. So the traditional shared ownership schemes is very difficult to continue buying and get to that 100% ownership. Whereas what he's done is he's developed a way or a model for people to be able to buy it back in an
without
affordable
interest.
way.
This is the
Completely without
this is the key thing. And I think you know, a lot of the things that he was talking about, even when it comes to, you know, cryptocurrencies and things like that, there's elements where if the intention is X, i.e. buying your flights or you know, whatever it might be, that is permissible. The speculation element of you know, is that because of supply and demand, that's going to increase your value of one cryptocurrency, right? So today it's worth £10 and actually it's going to be worth £100. That is a no-go, right? So I think, you know, and when you look beyond that physical element of, okay, this is what it is, because there's nothing tangible anyway. It's money out of nothing, okay? But then if you look beyond that situation in terms of the social impact of it, then you realize that, subhanAllah, you know, this entire thing isn't sustainable, you know, for the common person on the street. You know, the housing crisis, the situation with renting, you know, who owns what with the tenant versus the landlord. So there's a lot of risks out there, and from what he was explaining there, another key takeaway was banks literally have no risk in the entire thing, right?
When they lend you the money for the house,
and that's probably
because eventually they'll sell the house, right? They'll take it from you, they'll sell the house, and they'll get their money back.
And obviously there's a bit of a drive at the moment anyway, talking about, you know, vulnerable customers and how you know, institutions deal with scenarios like that. This is not going to go away. How are we dealing with this? And subhanAllah, you know, this is an alternative solution which, you know, impacts the housing crisis, talks about the social element of individuals, and then also the mental health, the well-being, etc. There's an entire package, rather than everything's kind of split out into its own thing, if that makes sense, right?
Because they help you keep your home for as long as you can. And I think that was, for me, that was the key, because that was different. And again, it's very simple. You know, you've bought, you know, 50% of the house, say. So you've got 50% equity. And then if you get to a point where you've lost your job and literally you can't pay anything, you can start selling a portion of the house back to them on a monthly basis. Probably at the same price as you bought, right? So you carry on paying that, and you know, if you can pay the rent portion at the time, you can continue paying that and sell on a little bit of the property as well, so you can reduce your income. So there's a lot of things you can do, and you know, if you own 50% of a house, even if your house is worth, I don't know, say £400,000 and you've got £200,000 in that property. As long as you've got that, they're not kicking you out. And again, even once that all gone, you can continue renting there and start buying back afterwards once you've got a job. So it's, you know, it's probably the most ideal product that can come out in the market in this climate. You know, ideally, we want to be in a situation where we can afford a house without having to get loans and mortgages and all this kind of stuff.
That'd be the ideal scenario.
And unfortunately, the financial climate we're in, that's not happening. And that's not happening anytime soon. In fact, it looks like it's going to get even worse. So how are we meant to buy houses? You know, how are Muslims meant to buy a home? It's not just buying a house, buying a home for yourself, right? It's not just an investment or anything like that. You want a home for your family. So how do you do that? And this seems to me like the most ideal way of doing it. So I'm excited about the product. I know the brothers have been doing a lot of work promoting their concept and raising funds, and you know, from my understanding, they've raised quite a lot, and you know, they're confident they're going to be in a position to start, you know, lending either by the end of the year or even, you know, after the summer. So even this autumn. So I think they're close to launching, but we'll we'll get more details from them next week.
Exactly.
We're going to have Razaullah on the show. So I'm just reminding the audience that Razaullah, the founder of Primary Finance, and his chief finance officer Ahsan are going to be on the studio live next week at 7:30. So please tune in. And also, you've got us here for another 3-4 minutes. So if anyone wanted to call into the studio, I don't think anyone will, because you're probably getting ready.
You're ready
for your iftar and
watching
eating.
the clock now.
You know, you can call in. We're still here for 3 minutes, but I guess everybody's probably can smell the food now, right?
Or making the du'as. So
making the du'as. But I think, you know, again, thank you for listening. I hope you've got something out of this. And really, these guys, Primary Finance, go back onto their website.
Do you want to repeat that again?
Yeah, it's www.primary-finance.com. Go on there, look at the details of their product, and also see how you can support them. We need to support this. We're all conscious of, you know, we want to buy homes, and we're all conscious that we might be dealing with riba and all these kind of things. And some people kind of completely stay away from it because they don't want to be dealing with riba. Other people have bought their houses on the traditional mortgages and feel guilty about it, right? So all you guys need to do really is support the, you know, Razaullah, support Primary Finance, and see if we can bring this to the market. We need to help ourselves, help them, help ourselves bring this to the market.
You know, I love the fact that you're talking about the circular economy, right? So, you know, helping them is actually helping you at the end of the day, right? So there's no kind of, you know, one side is taking advantage of the other. Actually, it's a mutually exclusive, you know, kind of situation. But yeah, we might as well go back to the ads.
Yes.
And then
that's it really. So just for everyone, so we all are aware, you've got the community iftar, so hopefully everybody's here.
Everyone's, as soon as you open the doors,
I think as soon as we go out there, hopefully, I think we'll be ready. Actually, we'll probably be hearing the adhan as soon as we get out, because I'm actually starving, so I'm ready. I'm ready for my food. But anyway, so we'll leave you with the ads, and again, please make sure thank you for tuning in today, and please make sure you tune into the live show next week at 7:30 p.m. So thanks very much. Take care. Assalamu alaikum. Bye.
Ramadan FM, Ramadan FM, check it out.
Why not come and visit us at Al Ansar? We sell HMC meat, HMC frozen snacks, and a whole range of other foods and ingredients. And what's more, all throughout the month of Ramadan, we have a range of special offers. So come and see what we have in store. You can find us at 153 Queensway in Bletchley.
Thanks to your generous donations, Al Care Foundation, led by Imam Qasim, deliver aid worldwide to the poor and needy. Help us continue our valuable efforts in places such as Syria, Pakistan, Yemen and Africa by